Hi, everybody. I'm Kathy. I'm an alcoholic, and I'm honored to be here and speak at your group. I'm so grateful that Jay reminded me again because something has happened in the last couple of months. I turned 78 on the 20th of December, and my short-term memory is like not available. I also turned 50 a couple of days later. And thank God I remember my past, even though I don't remember 5 minutes ago too much. But Alcoholics Anonymous has given me a life that I couldn't have even imagined. So, I'm grateful anytime I have an opportunity to share a message of hope. Um, I'm a native Californian, fourth generation. I grew up across from orange groves. My father built our house. He was a contractor. And, I had a really sweet childhood, except for a few little glitches, like my grandfather molesting me when I was 6. And, my mother became an active alcoholic by the time I was 11. But, growing up in Alcoholics Anonymous, I've seen that that's not that uncommon for a lot of us, to have had that kind of trauma in our past. Um, I really was never going to drink because my mother was such an unlovely alcoholic. But for my 21st birthday, my parents took me and my first husband to Las Vegas to celebrate. And my father ordered me a drink called a Scorpion. And I really liked it because it came in a bowl and it had mermaid legs and it had a gardenia floating in it. And I liked the effect that just looking at it was very glamorous. And it tasted a lot like lemonade, so I sucked that puppy down. And my father thought that was cute, so he ordered me another Scorpion. And halfway through that second Scorpion, the magic of alcohol happened for me. I suddenly grew breasts. I was blonde, I was cute, I was articulate, um, and I liked it. I really, really liked it. And I remember that night, I ended the night with a martini in one hand and a Snickers bar in another. And that about sums me up. You know, I graduated to more Snicker bars later after I got sober. Um, we went home and, I had a third daughter as a result of that weekend. And I had this husband, and I proceeded to chase that feeling that I had with those scorpions. And I started going out with the ladies in my philanthropic group. I was young. I was really young. I was the youngest in the group. But, I tried everything. And a lot of it was about how I thought I looked when I was drinking. I know I didn't look so good later when I was having vomit come out of my nose and my eyelashes in my hair and all the other pretty things that happen to a woman alcoholic. It's not a good look. Um, I got a divorce after I had my third baby, and I moved from the little Orange Grove city in California to the beach, which was a really great place to be for a budding alcoholic. Um, I had never gone out to bars or, just I had never been a part of that scene, and I really liked it. Sometimes I drank in a, piano bar with a Brandy Alexander. Sometimes I drank in a biker bar on Rosecrans Avenue with all the boys and pitchers of beer. I wasn't really picky about what I drank as long as I got the effect. And I did that vigorously for the next 7 years. I got a divorce from my first husband, and I married my second husband when I was 27, and he was a sweet guy. I've had five husbands, five, and I still have the last one. And they all loved me. None of them beat me. They weren't alcoholics. There was like, you know, they were lovely men and they gave me a lovely life. And, it just wasn't that exciting for me. And so I had to stir the pot. Anyway, um, on my, I woke up 2 days after my 28th birthday. And it had just been, the last 2 years of my drinking, I drank for 7 years, were same. Uh, I'd start out wanting to be a lady and end up being a lady on the floor or vomiting or passed out. I had these three little girls, and they would, find me that way. And I remember the last night I drank, my oldest daughter was 9, and she came into the bathroom. I was having a drink while I was putting on my makeup, because don't we all? And she said, Mommy, are you going to get drunk again tonight? And I said, no little 9-year-old is going to tell me what to do. Now get out of here. I was really a loving mother. And, I woke up the next morning and it was the same. I had a god awful hangover. I had the runs because that came with it. I couldn't remember a lot of the night before, but I suspected I hadn't been a lady. And I was now in my second marriage. And I stood in my living room in the dark. It was around 5 a.m. And I said, I can't drink. Oh my God, I can't drink. And I didn't call my mother, who was sober 28 days. I looked up AA in the phone book and I called central office. I lived in Redondo Beach at the time. And I I got a young man and he said, you don't ever have to feel this way again if you don't want to. And he said he would have a woman call me back. And this woman called me back. Her name was Dee. And she asked if I could go all day without drinking. And I had not discovered the magic of the morning drink except on, holidays and weekends. And she said she would pick me up for a meeting that night. Now, I remember getting dressed thinking it didn't matter what I wore because I was just going to an AA meeting and, drunks. But she came and picked me up, and she was right before Christmas, December 22nd, 1974. And she was all dressed up. It was the only time I ever remember what anybody else was wearing, because I always remember what I was wearing because I'm self-centered. And she had on this green velvet blazer and a white lace blouse with a bow, and her hair was clean and shiny. I had my hair pulled back into a ponytail. It was dirty. And I went with her to the meeting. And when they asked for newcomers, I stood up and said, I'm Kathy, I'm an alcoholic. And by the grace of God and the program and the steps, I haven't had a drink since my first meeting, which is really amazing because I've done everything else that I used to do. I just haven't taken a drink. And at the first meeting, one of the speakers talked about pills. And I had a collection of pills that I took primarily for preventive measures. I had, Valium in case I got nervous, and I had a sleeping pill in case I couldn't sleep. I had all these pills. And at this first meeting, one of the speakers talked about that. And I didn't throw the pills away for 6 months, but I didn't take any. And I threw them away at 6 months because um, I was looking for something in a drawer and they fell out of the cupboard and hit me in the head. And that's when I flushed them down the toilet. And I, thank God. Um, my first year of sobriety, I'm grateful to say I was introduced to service right away. And if you want to know the antidote to self centeredness, it's service. And it doesn't have to be anything big. You don't have to be the secretary. You don't have to be the speaker. I picked up these two ladies 3 times a week and drove them to a meeting. Neither one of them drove. One of them was Paula, and she had, I think, 6 years when I got sober. And the other one was a newcomer, June, who just had a few weeks. And, I picked those ladies up every week for meetings, and we had a meeting before and a meeting after in the car. And I was at June's bedside when she passed away from cancer. Um, many years later. That first year, I I asked the person who had made the 12-step call on me to be my sponsor, and she just had a little bit more time than I did, and she wasn't really into the book. And after a while, at 5 months, I asked someone else to be my sponsor. I asked Charlene, and Charlene scared me. She was confident and she knew the book and she made eye contact. And so I asked her to be my sponsor. It's funny, I've had 5 sponsors in 50 years and they've all scared me. I think that's a good thing. Um, she didn't really help me work the steps. I remember I did a fourth and fifth step with her, including a sex inventory. And, that's really all I remember about working the steps with Charlene. But as time went on, I needed a different sponsor. And when I was 19 years sober, I asked this woman, Noelle, who was 4 years younger in sobriety than I was, but she knew the big book like the back of her hand. She worked the steps. She talked solution. And she had a 50-year marriage, and her kids were all squared away and in recovery. And I wanted what she had. And she had me, work the steps with her out of the book. And I remember the night before I was going to do my fifth step thinking, I don't even know this woman. I had made a searching and fearless moral inventory in my fourth and fifth step at 19 years. And really, it was probably the most honest I'd ever been with myself, let alone with anyone else. And I went to her house, I prayed. I just thought, what if she's a blabbermouth? What if I don't even know her? But I trusted God, and I went and I read my fifth step to her, and she was darling. She lived by the beach. She had overlooked the ocean, and she sat in her chair while I was reading my inventory, and she was doing needlepoint. And there were a couple of places in my inventory that I had been vague. And she put her needlepoint down and said, "What exactly do you mean by kinky sex?" And it was like, oh my God, I had to tell her it was with animals and multiple men. And oh my God, it was bad. But she didn't freak out and she didn't throw me out. And when I left her house that day, I felt free. I really did. I felt free. And the book instructs that we go to a place where we can be quiet for an hour and think about what we have just done and ask ourselves if we've left anything out. And I did that. I went to a park I was living in San Pedro, and I went to a park and I thought about, my inventory and what I had read and I hadn't left anything out, trust me. And at that point, I had been married and divorced 4 times at 19 years. And no, 3 times. And I tore up my inventory in 4 different pieces and I put it in 4 different trash cans in case anyone was following me. And I walked away and I had a clean slate. A couple of years later, I married for the 4th time. And another sweet man who loved me, who was good to me. And, you know, I was the problem. I was always the problem. It wasn't them. Um, I was the problem because I couldn't be completely honest with another human being. I couldn't have a healthy relationship with another human being. And, and when I got bored, I left. And that's what happened there. And I went home, and that's when I got Noelle to be my sponsor. And she said, there's something wrong with someone who's had four marriages and who's, 19 years sober. And, I realized that was true. And so she gave me some rules, which I was very insulted about, like I couldn't go out except in groups. I couldn't go out with anybody unless she met them. I couldn't sleep with anyone unless, I'd known them a year. Well, I found a loophole because my friend Tom, this is maybe a year later, my friend Tom, I had met in therapy 10 years before. So, I went out with him, and of course, I slept with him because I'd known him 10 years. And, 2 years later, Tom and I got married. And that's my fifth husband. And miraculously, we're still married. We celebrated 28 years of marriage in May. And, you know, he has he has seen me in all my fabulous incarnations, he's been to meetings with me, he's heard me speak. He loves Alcoholics Anonymous because they tell the truth. We tell on ourselves. Thank God to have a place to go where I can tell on myself, where I can say what I'm thinking or what I wanted to do but didn't do. My daughters have grown up in AA. My oldest daughter turned 59 last April. My youngest daughter is 57, no, 56. My middle daughter's 58, I think. Yeah. And, they have grown up with meetings in my house. My sponsor had a meeting in her house, a woman's meeting, that where she cooked a meal for us. Like she cooked dinner and she put out the good silverware and the china. And so when I was in a place that I could do that, I started doing the same thing. I had two meetings a week. I had a Tuesday meeting for lunch because those were the people that didn't work. And I had a Thursday meeting for in the evening for the ladies who worked. And I did that for many years. This right now, this time is the first time since I was 10 years sober or 20 years sober, that I haven't had a meeting in my house. And that's primarily because there are two really good women's meetings here where I live now in Colorado Springs. And, I've thought about using Jay's book, but I haven't asked him yet as a topic for. Jay wrote a wonderful book called Relationship Resilience. And I do have a lot of experience with relationships. And then Jay has had a successful marriage and lots of good stuff. So, for several years, I had these women's meetings in my house. And I recommend it because there's something so intimate about a meeting in your home where you get to have coffee and talk to each other. And it's just an intimate setting. And, I go to in-person meetings pretty much every day here at, a hall that's called Walk the Talk, which I think is very cool. And, you know, I'm grateful, Um, let's see. I got married to, anyway, I got married to my current husband. That's what he refers to himself as, my current husband. 28 years ago. We've been together for 30 years, which, I mean, who does that? Certainly not I. And I've learned, my sponsor, Noelle, for years before. I had her for 16 years before she passed away, but she taught me to treat my marriage like my program. In other words, be willing to go to any lengths, and think about the other person. And if you're not sure, call your sponsor. And I called my sponsor plenty. And I I had my sponsor and her husband John, who were both in the program, meet my husband at the beginning of our relationship. And I remember Tom, my husband, had the flu. He had the stomach flu. On the way to dinner, we had to stop twice so he could throw up by the side of the road. And when we got to the restaurant, he was very quiet. And Noelle came to court with me the next day for my fourth divorce and said, he's not enough for you. And, I told her, I've known this man for 10 years and he is enough for me. He's the only man I've ever been with that I cannot cut off at the knees. And I recommend having someone that you respect enough I mean, I can give my best monologue in an argument with my husband and think I've won, I'm brilliant. And then he just says one sentence and puts me in my place. And it's never a degrading sentence. He's been able to say he loves me even when we're having an argument. We don't argue that much anymore. I think we've argued all the arguments. The only argument left is money, and that comes up every now and then. So my daughters grew up with Alcoholics Anonymous meetings in my home, with newcomers getting well on my sofa, and with me going to meetings every day. And when my oldest daughter has twin daughters, and when they were 10, she said, Mom, I want you to take Brittany and Meredith to a meeting because I want them to have what I have. She wanted them to have the tools. And I did. I took her to a meeting on Sunset on Saturday mornings. I don't remember the name of it. Jay, you probably do. But it was, it was a mixed meeting. It was a good meeting. There was a speaker. And, my granddaughters were 10 and they were like wide-eyed. But they've learned the tools of pray for an attitude change, pray for a change of perspective. Let me love him or her where they are. Um, first things first. All the things that we learn from the cliches and then from practice. And so I have a family. I have 9 grandkids and I have 9 great grandkids. And the 9 grandkids have the tools. They know to write a gratitude list. They've written letters, amends letters. It's this program, just like our drinking has a ripple effect and it, washes out over everybody and makes a big mess, our recovery also has a ripple effect. And, I encourage people who have young children to let them be exposed to it, because having them grow up with tools for living is a gift that only a recovered alcoholic can give. And we have that. So about 3 years ago, um, let's see, who was first? My youngest daughter moved to Colorado. We were living in Santa Barbara. And and then my granddaughters, four of my grandkids also moved to Colorado. So we moved to Colorado. And, I'm a native Californian. I've grown up in California. I've never lived anywhere else. And now I live in Colorado. And it's very different. I mean, I used to wear 5-inch heels to meetings. And trust me, they don't do that in Colorado. And now I can't even get my feet into them. But we moved to a little mountain town on 5 acres on the side of a mountain. And they had meetings. They had 3 meetings a week. And I had been there a couple of weeks and I said, "Is there a women's meeting?" And they said, "No, there's never been one." And I said, "Well, let's start one." So I started one in my house and I invited these women from Westcliff, Colorado, to come once a week. They came at 2 because some of them worked and that was the best time for them. That's really my nap time, but I was generous. Anyway, they came to my house and we started this women's meeting. And 9 months ago, we moved away from Westcliff into the city, Colorado Springs, because my oldest daughter, who now seems to be in charge of my life in her mind, um, thinks we shouldn't live on the side of a mountain. So we moved into Colorado Springs, and the women's meeting is still going on. I gave them all my coffee cups, and they have coffee in the cups and remember me. And it's like doing good, passing on what's been done for me, like having a meeting in someone's house, getting to know people intimately, hearing the stories. And it's just, you can't describe it to someone. It says, or they say, I'm not even sure which, um, we will have a life beyond our wildest dreams. My only dream was to either be a bride or a princess. And I hit the bride thing. I've been a bride 5 times. I've never been a princess, but um, I have been an active member of Alcoholics Anonymous for 50 years and a few days. The 22nd was my 50th anniversary. And what I did that day, which, I was kicking myself the whole time, I had a birthday party for myself. And, it's right before Christmas. I didn't want to do it, but I do it because I want to honor Alcoholics Anonymous. I want to show the people that are here now that I'm meeting in meetings, I want to show them that it works, it works. I got my first sponsee when I was 2 years sober, and I still sponsor her. I have a Zoom meeting on Thursdays with the people I got sober with, and there are 3 or 4 people in that meeting that are sober longer than I am. One of them, Johnny Wooten, has 5 years, 55 years, and the others have like 53 and 51, and I have my measly 50. And these people, I've known them my whole sobriety. Um, I've had them in my home for Christmas. Um, I've been there when one of my sponsees was raped. Someone climbed in her kitchen window and raped her at knife point. She was 5 months sober, and she stayed sober through that. And I still sponsor her, and she's 48 years sober. And, God, you have no idea what a gift it is to be able to track someone else's life, to remember what hurt them and what brought them joy. A few years after that, she got married in my backyard, she and her husband. And I got married in my backyard too. I think that was my third. Anyway, um, I, I have a lot of experience with weddings and, and relationships. Um, you know, her name is Bobby, and she lives in Maine. And I see her every Thursday morning. And, we can talk to each other. It's like we know each other's history and we know each other's intimate history. She was there for my third marriage and my fourth marriage. And I think she was there for my fifth marriage too. Anyway, this one, I seem to be staying married, not because my husband's better than any of my other husbands, but because I'm better. I'm I'm more able to make a commitment. I'm more able to look at myself. Um, when we first got married and I had Noel, Tom, my husband, is not an alcoholic. In fact, he hardly drinks. If we go out with people, he'll have a glass of wine, mostly just to be a part of. But, I had Noel, and he learned to call John Noel's husband, which was really a bad deal for me, but because John was also sober. But, it's like together, we work a program. And there's a mutual respect. And may I just say that when I was drinking, there was no respect. I had no self respect. I was promiscuous, I was selfish, self centered. One of the main hurts in my children's lives were when I was 23, 5 years before I got sober. Was working, I was living in the Orange Grove town and working in LA. It was an hour away. And I found a babysitter in the newspaper. But of course, I was 23, self centered, and stupid, and I didn't vet the babysitter. And the babysitter's husband molested my daughters violently, my oldest daughter. And she didn't feel safe enough to tell me till I was 11 years sober. That's how long it took for her to trust that I could be there. And I remember that day, it was a Sunday. We were on my way to my mother's for dinner. And when the next morning I called my therapist, because by then I had a therapist, I called someone on the program that I knew had experienced the same thing. And he now has, I don't know, 58 years sobriety. And he, gave me direction, and I took it. And the next day I took my daughter to see my therapist. And, I sat with her for several sessions, and then I was excused, and she stayed on for a year. And, today my daughter loves me, and she has downright said, "Mom, I forgive you." I was a sick woman at 23, alcoholic, self-centered to the max, and, just completely oblivious to the needs of my kids. I remember after the molestation had happened, but before I knew about it, she would like start crying and having a fit and throwing herself on the floor because she didn't want to go to the babysitter. All I said was, "You're making me late for work." I didn't ask her why. I didn't ask her what happened. All I knew was she was making me late for work. And that is alcoholism right there, because I didn't have any ability to have compassion or um, empathy for anyone, not even my children, because I was just concerned about me. And that's who came into Alcoholics Anonymous, someone who was just concerned about me. And it took me a long time, a long time to strip away that selfish, self centered part of me and care about my kids. And so now that daughter and my youngest daughter both live near me here in Colorado. We all moved. I still have one daughter in Tennessee, and she's planning to come when her husband retires in a couple of years. But I'm here with two daughters and four grandkids and three grandsons in law and nine great grandkids. And I'm invited into their lives. You know, I'm a part of my family. And I did not deserve that when I was drinking. And, we had a birthday party for one of the great grandkids last weekend. And, I go, usually I'm in charge of bringing mashed potatoes, but one of my grandsons in law was making scallop potatoes. So I didn't bring mashed potatoes. And I just sit there and I observe the family that has grown up and thrived as a result of my sobriety. You know, I don't take the credit, but I give the credit to Alcoholics Anonymous, because we have a family where there's not fighting and there's not drama and there's not DUIs and all that stuff. They all own their own homes, my grandkids, my kids, and they all work, they all have jobs, and there's harmony. And that is not the family that I was headed for when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous. Um, my everyday life today, very simple. I get up at 5. I have coffee. I stare out the window. That's my meditation. I read, you know, I read the daily reflections. I get dressed, I make my bed, and I go to a 9 a.m. meeting in person. And, I'm getting to know, we've only lived here since March. So I'm just getting to know these people. That's why I had my little birthday party, so they could come and get to know me and I could get to know them. And, so far, so good. You know, it's what has worked for the last 50 years and it's still working today. And, when I go to my meetings, I usually share because I have a message of hope. You know, I didn't share on Friday because I'm speaking on New Year's Eve at an alkathon, which I've never been to before. And I didn't want to use up all my fabulousness on sharing at a meeting. So I decided to spare them. And I almost forgot this meeting. I mean, I've had it on my calendar. Jay has sent me reminders, but my short-term memory has shrunk. And I've asked my grandson-in-law to drive us to the meeting, my husband and I, because it's downtown and I don't know my way around much here yet, and it's dark. It's an 8 o'clock meeting that's already like past my bedtime. But you know what? I'll go and I'll show up and I'll tell my story. And I know I know that the people who came to the meeting to hear a message will hear one. They'll hear the message they need to hear. And that's how it works. It's like I go to a meeting, I'm still hearing new stuff, after 50 years. I'm still learning. Like this group that I go to every day, they study the traditions. And in all the meetings I went to in California, I don't recall ever studying the traditions. So, like already, I'm a newcomer in that department. And, um, my life, I don't walk around with a pit in my stomach. I don't wake up afraid. I don't wake up and hit the ground thinking, what have I done? What did I do? What did I say? Who did I sleep with? When I was drinking, I was always losing my shoes because I'm 6 feet tall. And when I would go to bars where there was dancing, I would give the bartender my shoes. And I was always forgetting them, like brand new shoes. Um, I don't do that anymore. Mostly I don't go to bars and go dancing. But if there was a meeting there, I would, you know. I certainly have gone to conventions where there's dancing. And that I was 5 months sober when I went to my first convention and danced sober for the first time. And guess what? I had fun. I've had fun in Alcoholics Anonymous. I've made lifelong friends. I've traveled with my friends. My best friend Peggy, who I forgot to remind about this meeting, she and I and another friend went to Europe a few years ago. And, it's like we're like heart to heart friends. We're not superficial friends. We're not, can I one up you with my wardrobe friends? We're, see me crying, see me at my worst and at my best. And, those are the kinds of friends I want. That's the kind of friend I want to be. And, tomorrow is Sunday. And my plan, I usually stay home on Sunday and do a Zoom meeting. I lived in Santa Barbara for 16 years. I lived in Manhattan Beach. That's where I got sober. I lived in LA. I lived in Hollywood Hills. That's where I met Jay. And now I live in Colorado Springs and I go to a Santa Barbara Zoom meeting on Sundays and see the people that I've known, for many, many years. And this is a gift you don't want to miss. You really don't want to miss it because whatever your good ideas about what it is, if it's just about not drinking, sit back and hold on to your seat because it's way more than that. And it's more than I can even predict, You will you will go places, you'll have highs like you never had from drinking or using, because these are the highs that come from the heart. These are the highs that come from knowing you've overcome or you've helped someone overcome a fatal disease. And, I have great respect for alcoholism. I have it. My mother had it. Um, my grandfather had it. And, now I'm in recovery. So
Five
I
minutes.
5 minutes, I'm out of here, Jay. um, I just want to give a pitch for giving it a try. Give it a try. They used to say, stay until the miracle. Don't leave before the miracle. And I thought they were a bunch of schmucks, but turns out they weren't. There really is a miracle. There are miracles. And, the more I open myself and I refer to the steps, work the steps, and share what I know and what I've experienced, um, the more beautiful my life is. And I wish it for you. Thank you.
Yay. Let me stop this.